When I was younger, I used to find different families to babysit for through Craigslist. My parents helped me set up my own posting, and once I got the hang of it myself, I was able to search for postings from others looking for sitters. I was actually very successful in doing this for quite some time. I also loved it. For the most part, the kids were great. Minimal issues, and if I didn't care for a kid because they were just rude or uncontrollable, my parents made an excuse for me to not have to do it anymore. However, this one family I sat for was worse than just having an ornery or mean kid. They actually creeped me out. I believe this was back in about 2008. I had my own car at this point, and the family only lived about 30 miles from me. When I got there, the mom and dad introduced me to their kids. They were twin boys that were about 9. I'll call them Dylan and Dalton. They looked very nice and well-mannered at first. They were the typical twins type where the parents dressed them the same. I remember when I first met them, they had on jeans and matching red and blue shirts. It was a Sunday, and the mom said they had just gotten back from church, so they could change their clothes if they wanted. They gave a few rules, like they were allowed one snack, since they were just finishing lunch at the time that I got there, and they were not allowed to play out front, since they didn't have a fence around the front yard. Other than some normal things like that, it seemed like they were pretty laid back. They said they would be gone for a few hours, and they headed out. The first time was fine. It was a lot of getting to know each other, it seemed. They asked me what school I went to, and they told me about their school and favorite subjects. They shared things about themselves, as well as embarrassing things about each other. It was funny and, all in all, quite a normal visit. It wasn't until the second time they started getting more comfortable with me, I guess. This time, I went over around 4 o'clock. They hadn't had dinner yet, but the mom told me they had ordered pizza and gave me the cash to pay for it, and that they would be back later around 9 or 10. After they left, the boys came and watched TV with me until the pizza arrived. While we were eating, Dylan looked up and just gave some random creepy fact like, "Did you know Gacy killed X amount of boys before he was caught?" I learned they knew a lot about serial killers. I didn't know how to respond, so as I do when kids tell me weird stuff, I just went, "Oh, that's crazy," and then continued to eat my pizza. That's when Dalton made some comment about how stupid he was for doing it. I tried saying something like, "Some people are just sick and it's hard to understand, I'm sure." But then he specified that, well, he shouldn't have kept them in his own house. That's what got him caught. That one I didn't know how to respond to, so I just stared at him and they started laughing. So I laughed too and said, "Yeah, people can do some unthinkable things." Again, they knew a lot about serial killers. I got random facts like that on a regular basis when I went over there, and they even liked to play a pretend game called Killer. They had me play it too, but it was like hide and seek, but if you were it, you were the killer, and if you were found, you were killed. They typically made a slashing motion with a knife and would act like they were stabbing or slicing you. When they found the other, they would just be laughing hysterically. I didn't find out what this game actually was until I was playing it, because they said it was hide and seek. I wasn't comfortable playing it after the first time, and I told them they shouldn't do that either. They actually seemed confused as to why, saying, "It's not like we're really killing you," all with that creepy smile on their face. I just tried explaining that it could scare people, so it's best just to play normal hide and seek. That didn't stop them from doing other creepy things though. I continued to get creepy facts about killers, death, and other grim things. They also tried to watch scary movies or documentaries on crimes, but I didn't allow it because of their age. There was one time I went over there and they were in the middle of watching one of the Child's Play movies. So I played it off when the parents were there and said, "Oh, it's okay if they watch those movies?" And the response was like, "Why couldn't they?" As they told me, yeah, they're just not allowed to watch anything with nudity. Makes sense, I guess. So since that was confirmed, they seemed to take advantage of it and watch some of the weirdest movies while I was there. Even if they were watching something a normal 9-year-old would watch, they would change it as soon as their parents left. I liked scary movies myself, so I was okay with watching it, but their demeanor was more unsettling. Celebrating when someone died or making fun of them for a choice they made. One of the last straws for me was when I was doing some homework and they had been in their room playing. I felt like I was being watched, so I looked behind me where the hall was to their bedroom and saw one of them standing there. I asked them if there was something wrong, and while smiling, they just said, "I bet I could have tied you up just now. I just didn't have any rope," and then went back to their room. Nope, I was no longer comfortable being alone with them. Some of the stuff they said and did was definitely odd for their age, but still being young myself, who was I to judge someone's parenting? So I never brought it up to their parents, but that time I did. I told them that night what they had said to me and about their weird killer game, and they basically laughed it off saying, "Boys will be boys." They also said that they mean no harm or would never actually do anything to me, and talked about how they are still easier to raise than girls. So with their parents being uncaring, I thought maybe I was overreacting. I actually only had sisters, so I didn't know what boys were like at home. What I did do though, was the next time that I babysat, I made sure I wasn't alone. After asking the boys' parents, they said they were okay with me bringing a friend over, girls only, but they wouldn't be paying for both of us. So I just split the money with said friend. So the first time we were over there, after the parents left, one of them said, "Oh, a second victim," and started laughing. While we ate dinner, they asked her all the same questions they asked me the first time, and then went to their room to play. Once they were out of sight, I was talking to my friend who agreed that they seemed a little weird, but she hadn't really experienced it to the fullest. Until later that night, I hadn't noticed that one of them went to the restroom and the other had called me in their room. I went into their room to see Dylan standing on his bed, and he asked me to come closer, waving for me hurriedly. I approached him quickly, thinking he needed to tell me something, or maybe something was wrong. Once I got close enough, he was able to look over my head and said, "It would be much easier to throw a bag over your head when I'm this tall." Freaked out, I told him that was not nice to say, nor should he even be thinking about those things, and he just looked confused as to why I would say that. I just left the room and went back to the living room to see Dalton acting something out in front of my friend, and she just looked shocked. I walked in on him explaining something about dirt, and when I asked what was going on, he stopped and said nothing and walked away back in their room. Afterwards, I asked my friend what he was talking about, and she said Dalton had been explaining why dumping a body in the water was better than burying it. She finally understood what I meant by them being creepy. I like my fair share of scary movies and crime documentaries, but I don't remember being interested or retaining knowledge like they did at that age. My friend said she would not go back with me and suggested I don't either. I ended up telling my parents a little more about the things they said and did, and they were disappointed that I didn't tell them sooner. They agreed that it also was not appropriate behavior for kids their age, and said they didn't want me over there anymore either. They actually called their mom and explained everything, and she still didn't see anything wrong with it. She said that she thought I did great with her boys, and even offered to pay double if I watched them a few more times. It was hard to pass up, thinking I could just buck up and get the money, but my parents refused. I was 17 and still living with my parents, so what they say goes, and I didn't go back. Every once in a while, I try to look them up to see if they ever acted on their little games, but I never did find anything. I hope that they were just really weird kids and grew out of it, but it sure did scare the hell out of me and my friend. So this may not be creepy to some, but I certainly thought it was, or at least unsettling, considering it was a child. I started watching this little girl, Bailey, in about 2002. I had been babysitting for a few years at the time, and my parents made for a great free walking advertisement. Bailey was actually my mom's boss's daughter. She was okay for the most part. I'd say she was probably your typical only child that got anything she wanted. She was definitely spoiled. They didn't really have rules on things she wasn't allowed to have or do. The only real rule they had was that if I was watching late, she had to be in bed by 9. Even though she was very much aware of the rule, she always gave me grief about it. She would whine, beg, or delay as much as possible, like spending way too long washing her hands to avoid bed. Otherwise, if she got in trouble or was told no, she tried throwing tantrums. I grew up with some pretty tough grandparents, and they did not tolerate that kind of thing, so I pride myself on being able to stop the kids I babysat from doing the same thing. It worked on her for the most part when she realized that it wouldn't change my answer. I assume it typically worked on her parents. There were a few times that she would get pretty angry and try to hit or kick me, and I made sure to let her know that that was never okay, so she would be sent to her room until she calmed down. Since my mom knew her mom, I asked her beforehand as to what, if anything, I should tell her parents, and she agreed that I should tell them everything. Her behavior was not okay, and it was best to get it under control now while she was still young. So one time when her dad got home, I told him what was going on. He reminded me of my own dad in the sense that he seemed like the enforcer, as opposed to mom being the spoiler. He agreed that she was being aggressive and tried doing the same to her mom, but never tried with him, and promised that they were working on it. I felt like he was being honest and pretty much just left it at that. I knew there were a few times she seemed to get upset, but without me even saying anything, she would drop what she was doing and storm off in her room. She would then come out a short time later and continue doing what she had started. But then she started getting creepy. In the living room, there was a corner that was her play area. It had some of her bigger setups, like the play kitchen that had a sink, an oven, and an overhead cabinet, as well as a small chest that had the kitchen stuff in it and some of her other toys. I was reading a book while the TV was playing some show she turned on. She had moved over to her toys and would go back and forth between watching and playing. She had some kind of doll that she was pretending like she was talking to and making food for on the stove. I would look up on occasion just to see what she was doing, but otherwise, I just let her do her thing. But then I could hear her whispering, but it was fast, like she was really trying to get her point across. I figured she was still just playing around, so I didn't look up from my book and just listened. She would then sigh and whisper something else that I couldn't make out. I couldn't help but look up when I started hearing a thudding sound, and all I saw was her smashing this doll's head in the cabinet door. I watched this play out for a few seconds and a few head smashes when I finally tried to get her attention by saying, "Bailey, what are you doing?" And her only response was, "She's getting punished." I again just watched until she finally stopped, threw the doll in the play oven and slammed it shut. Only a little alarmed, I asked her why she did that, and she told me that she made her mad because she wouldn't get in the car. She had a little Barbie-like car that she was trying to put it in, but it was too big. That was a bit aggressive for her, so I told her what she was doing was pretty mean, and that's not something she should think about doing when she got angry. She then looked at me confused, saying that Daddy said this was okay because they weren't real. That was pretty scary to me. I understand trying to offer alternatives to hitting or kicking people, but I don't feel like this was a good solution. So I tried myself, saying it was okay to be frustrated or angry, but being violent was never a good way to release that anger. While I was talking to her, she interrupted me, saying with a smile, "But it's okay to kill my dolls because they're not real and they can't scream and get me in trouble." I didn't even know how to respond. I guess her dad wasn't as assertive as I thought he was. I swear, I felt like a parent that day trying to explain to this child as to why what she was doing was not okay, real or fake. She did love to color, and she liked to set things up like poses and color it. She once had a stuffed animal sitting on the floor holding something, and she drew and colored it. It still looked like a young kid did it, but you could still make out what it was supposed to be. I thought since she was so passionate about it, that I told her to try to use that as a way to relieve stress instead of being so violent. She seemed confused at first, as kids do, but then started to like the idea. I tried being a little silly about it and drew an angry rabbit, so she started drawing more. I didn't know what to do with this though, because it seemed like her dad knew about it. I didn't feel like the violence was okay by any means though, so again, I told my mom about it and she agreed that they should at least know what happened. She said she would talk to her boss about it because she was pretty cool with her, and I remember kind of joking with her dad about it when I brought it up. I continued to watch her and she had a few more outbursts, but I'd always give her that look and she would storm off to her room and start coloring aggressively. I don't know if she did it all the time when I wasn't there, but I hope they kept up with it or something better than violence. Her dad said he was working on the outburst with her, but never really specified how. I stopped watching her after a year or so when I moved out of state, but I've wondered how she is mentally. It's people like that I hope just grow out of that kind of thing, but it's still kind of creepy to think about what it could turn into. I had a bit of a creepy experience with a kid that happened about a week ago when I was at the store shopping for groceries. I was out taking some time to myself and just trying to pick up stuff for the week's dinner. I was browsing through the produce, trying to come to a decision on what I want, when I felt a slight tug on my pants, like someone was trying to get my attention. I turned to look and, sure enough, there's some random little boy standing there and staring at me with puppy dog eyes. I looked down and kind of smiled, and then looked around to see if I could see his parents, but strangely enough, there weren't any adults around. I immediately went into protective dad mode, thinking that this kid got lost in the store, and I was going to have to help him find his parents. I knelt down and said hi to him, and asked him where his mom and dad were. He stared at me for several seconds with a blank expression for several more seconds, and then changed into a big smile. He then said, "I knew you were here. I could smell you." I was a bit confused. I didn't think I smelled bad or anything, but the other part of that was trying to figure out what he meant by knowing that I specifically was here. I asked him if I knew him, and he just held that smile while staring at me. I asked him where his parents were, and he just slowly turned his head toward the main aisle. I looked up, and sure enough, there was a man and a woman walking toward me. The woman grabbed his hand and was apologizing profusely and saying that she was sorry if he was bothering me. I told her it was okay, that my boy was about his same age, so I knew how they can get in public. We talked to her a few seconds about kids, both being parents and whatnot, and the whole time, her kid was just staring straight at me with that terrifying smile. After a few more moments, they started to walk away, and I told them to have a good day with the basic pleasantries, and as they walked away, he looked at me and said, "I hope I smell you again soon," and then just kept on walking with them like this wasn't the weirdest thing he could have said. I used to babysit and do light housework for this family for many years. They had one kid named Jacob at the time. He was probably around 8, I believe. I started watching him about a year earlier, so I had gotten to know him and his family pretty well. Jacob was your average little boy. Nothing weird about him, and he was very soft-spoken and well-mannered. He was obsessed with SpongeBob at the time, so we watched a lot of that, but that was probably the worst it ever got with him. I was already out of high school at this point, so there were times that I watched him last minute when there was an emergency or something they had to do quickly. So when they called me asking if I could watch him the following day unexpectedly, I didn't hesitate. I didn't have anything to do that day as I was on summer break from my college courses, so at least I could make some extra money. When I got there, Jacob's mom, Anna, explained that she had to take her Aunt Barb to the hospital for surgery. I don't remember what the surgery was, but it wasn't major. It had something to do with a vein in her leg, I believe, or something similar. Anna was planning to just take Jacob with her, but as kids do, he became a bit upset at the thought of having to sit quietly at a hospital with very little to do, so she asked if I could watch him instead. I had to be there around 10 in the morning because her surgery was going to be around noon, and they wanted to get there early for check-in and paperwork. When I arrived, Anna and Barb were both there as she went ahead and stayed the night there. I had met Barb before, and she was a very sweet lady and seemed to be fairly close to Jacob as well. He was sitting next to her when I got there, and he was reading a book to her. Anna told me a few things and asked me to bring the clothes up from the laundry room. I gave well wishes to the two ladies, and they were off, leaving us to our day. The day started out fine. I got the laundry out and even folded and put it away. I even helped him put together a little Lego set. Overall, it was a normal day there. Anna said she expected to be home a little before visiting hours were over, so she could still come home and make dinner, and said she would call when she was out of surgery to check in on us. I was expecting to be there till around 6, so I was thinking it would be a laid-back day of watching movies and playing around on my laptop. Jacob played in his room some, and then came into the living room and watched TV with me for a while. It was probably around 2. We already had lunch, and we went back to watching a movie, but then, out of nowhere, Jacob started whimpering. I looked over at him, thinking maybe he was holding back from laughing because of the movie, but he looked visibly distraught. I asked him if he was okay, and he didn't respond, so I put my hand on his shoulder to get his attention. And that's when he started bawling. The crying was just non-stop, and I had no idea what was wrong. I tried to calm him the best I could and tell him everything was okay to try and find out what was going on. When he did finally stop to breathe, he said very softly, "Barbie's dead." I didn't think I quite heard him, so I asked him again, and he said, "Aunt Barbie died." He called his great aunt Barbie, and knowing she just went in for something simple, I tried assuring him that she was okay and that he would probably see her soon, thinking Anna might take him up there tomorrow or something. He looked so sad for a little boy, like nothing I've ever seen on a kid before. I was almost choking up myself, but I held it together, I thought for him, but he put his hand on my cheek and then smiled, saying, "It's okay, she's not in pain anymore." I was pretty confused at this point and didn't know what else to say, so I just watched as he sat back down on the couch, let out a big sigh, and continued watching his movie. I didn't know how to feel about all of this, so I just sat there with him, looking over at him every once in a while, and saw him smiling and giggling. I thought maybe it was just some weird thing he decided to do. Maybe they overheard them talking about her surgery and was scared, not really knowing what it was, so I just let it be and thought I would just tell Anna and her husband Tom about it when they got home. It had been a few more hours and a few snacks later that I realized Anna hadn't even called me to give an update, but I just thought she forgot and would call when she got the chance. It was more for her to check in on us, so I wasn't worried. But when it hit 5 p.m. and still no word from her, I thought I would call her at least and leave a message saying everything was okay, which I did because she didn't answer. I also called Tom since I knew he got off around 7 to give an update as a sly way of calling to see if everything was okay. Soon after, I got a call back from Tom, and he seemed a little disheveled in his conversation when asking how Jacob was. As mentioned, I got to know this family pretty well, so I asked if there was something wrong, and he said that Barb had some complication in surgery, delaying Anna from coming home. He then asked if I was willing to possibly stay the night, or at least later, and that they would pay more, and also offered to pay for dinner. Of course, I agreed. I gave him well wishes, and then we waited for dinner to arrive. It was probably around 9 or so. Jacob had fallen asleep on the floor in his room playing when Tom finally came home. He apologized for making me stay later, but told me that Barb had actually died during surgery. I was shocked at first, knowing it wasn't supposed to be life-threatening, but she had complications with the anesthesia and stopped breathing. It's not something that happened often, I guess, but it was still a risk, and sadly, a life was lost. That's when I remembered Jacob's little episode he had, and I told Tom about it. I told him about the time and how it was like a switch, and the tears started falling, and he claimed she had passed. He thought it was really strange too, and confirmed that they never mentioned that she could die from the surgery or anything like that, so he had no idea where he would have come up with the idea. Other than that though, he didn't really have much more to say about it and thanked me for my time. He tried to pay me double, but it didn't feel right, so I didn't accept it. He told me that Anna had gone to be with her cousin, so she wasn't going to be home that night. I talked to Anna about it many months later, not wanting to bring it up too soon, and it seemed to touch her a bit. She said that Barb was like another mother to Jacob, and feels like their bond was just that strong that she reached him after she passed and let him know she was okay. It still gives me chills thinking about it to this day. Jacob is almost 17 now, and he has no memory of that day, but he remembers Barb vividly and says he felt like he already knew she was gone when his parents finally explained to him what happened. Either way, it was quite the experience for the babysitter. So that, my friends, was a collection of creepy kid stories. Stories about kids that do or say creepy things. There's something comical about the things that they say because they don't really have a filter, but then there's also the creepy side when they say things that don't make sense, like talking to ghosts or things that aren't there, or doing things that a normal child shouldn't do. And then you're like, how do you have so much creepy and you're so small? Thankfully, I don't have any kids and I have only heard funny things from my nieces and nephews, and I hope it stays that way. I'm good. I'll leave their parents to listen to those things. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below, and if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts, or let me know, have you heard a creepy thing from a kid? I'm sorry if you did. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week, and until next time, take care.